The Krillian battlecruiser Deathbringer cut through the void like a blade through silk, its hull gleaming with the dark metal that had terrorized 1,000 worlds. Admiral Zexkar stood on the bridge, his forearms crossed behind his back as he watched another civilization burn on the viewscreen. The planet below was dying, its atmosphere turning orange as their plasma bombardment continued. "Status report," Zexkar commanded, his voice a deep rumble that made even his hardened crew shift nervously. "Planetary defenses destroyed, Admiral. Population centers are being eliminated as ordered. Estimated time to complete sterilization, 4 hours," reported his tactical officer. Zexkar nodded, satisfied. The Krillians had built their empire on fear, and fear required examples. This world had dared to refuse tribute, and now it would serve as a warning to others. At 8 feet tall, with chitinous exoskeletons and razor-sharp claws, the Krillians were nightmare fuel made real. Their technology was centuries ahead of most species. Their military tactics brutal and efficient. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council," the communications officer announced hesitantly. "Put it through," Zexkar said. Though his mandibles clicked with irritation, the hologram of Ambassador Veltar materialized before him. The insectoid diplomat's antennae twitched nervously as he spoke. "Admiral Zexkar, the Council demands you cease this unprovoked attack immediately. The Terran Federation has filed a formal complaint." "The Terran Federation?" Zexkar interrupted, his voice dripping with disdain. "Those soft pink creatures from that backwater system? They dare question the Krillian Empire? The humans have been granted council representation, Admiral. Their diplomatic immunity," Zexkar severed the connection with a swipe of his claw across the control panel. "Humans. He had heard whispers about them lately. Some upstart species that had somehow convinced the Council to grant them membership despite having no military might to speak of. They were weak, fragile beings who lived barely a century and had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel. "Continue the bombardment," he ordered, "and send a message to High Command. Tell them the humans are becoming an irritation. Perhaps it's time we reminded the galaxy why they fear the Krillian name." 3 days later, the message came down from the Krillian High Command. The humans had filed formal complaints about 17 different Krillian military actions. They spoke of something called war crimes and crimes against sentience. The Empire's response was swift and decisive. "Prepare the fleet," Zexkar was ordered. "The humans need to learn their place. Destroy their diplomatic vessel and make it look like pirates. Then move on their home system." The plan was simple and brutal, as all Krillian plans were. The human diplomatic ship Harmony was traveling through neutral space, carrying their ambassador back from failed peace negotiations with the Zephyrian Collective. It would be easy prey. The Zexkar-S task force of 12 warships surrounded the small human vessel near the asteroid field of Kepler 442. The Harmony was pathetically small compared to even his smallest frigate, its hull gleaming white instead of the sensible black that would hide it from enemies. "Human vessel. Prepare to be boarded," Zexkar broadcast, not bothering to disguise his voice. "Let them know who was killing them. Your government has overstepped its bounds." The response surprised him. Instead of panic surrender or desperate pleas for mercy, a calm female voice replied, "This is Captain Sarah Shun of the Terran Federation ship Harmony. We are on a peaceful diplomatic mission and are protected under Galactic Council Resolution 447. Any attack on this vessel would constitute an act of war." Zexkar laughed. "A sound like grinding metal. Your resolutions mean nothing to us, human. You are insects compared to the might of the Krillian Empire. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick." "I'm afraid I can't do that, Admiral. We have passengers aboard, including medical personnel and refugees we're transporting to safety. I won't sacrifice innocent lives for your political games." The Admiral's patience snapped. These humans thought they could lecture him about tactics and politics. "Tactical, target their engines. Disable them first. I want to board their ship and show them what happens to those who defy the Empire." The plasma cannons fired, brilliant beams of energy that should have crippled the human ship instantly. Instead, something impossible happened. The beams struck what appeared to be empty space around the Harmony and dispersed harmlessly. "What?" Zexkar snarled. "Report. Sir, they appear to have some kind of defensive field we've never encountered before. Our sensors can't penetrate it." On the view screen, the small human ship suddenly accelerated at speeds that should have turned its crew into paste against the bulkheads. It weaved between the Krillian ships with impossible agility, its movements defying everything they knew about physics and inertia. "How are they moving like that?" Zexkar demanded. No organic crew could survive those forces. The Harmony came to a stop directly in front of the Deathbringer, close enough that Zexkar could see through its viewports. Inside, he could see humans moving normally, apparently unaffected by the crushing acceleration their ship had just performed. Captain Chun's voice came through the come again, still maddeningly calm. "Admiral Zexkar, I'm going to give you one chance to withdraw. You're clearly operating under some misconceptions about human capabilities. I'd rather not demonstrate why attacking us is a bad idea. You dare threaten us?" Zexkar roared. "All ships, focus fire on that vessel. Obliterate them." 12 Krillian warships opened fire simultaneously, enough plasma energy to crack a small moon. The beams struck the human ship and simply vanished, absorbed by whatever impossible technology protected it. The Harmony didn't return fire. Instead, it broadcast a simple message on all frequencies, warning to all vessels in this system. The Terran Federation ship Harmony is now implementing defensive protocols. Please clear the area immediately. What happened next would be talked about in hushed whispers throughout Krillian space for generations. The small human ship didn't fire weapons or launch missiles. Instead, it simply moved. One moment, Zexkar's flagship was surrounded by his task force. The next, the Harmony was somehow occupying the same space as the frigate Bloodclaw, and the Krillian ship simply wasn't there anymore. No explosion, no debris field. It had simply ceased to exist. The human ship continued its impossible dance, phasing through solid matter like a ghost. One by one, Zexkar watched his ships vanish until only the Deathbringer remained, its crew paralyzed with terror. "This is impossible," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "This violates every law of physics." Captain Chun's voice returned, gentle but firm. "Admiral, you and your crew are going to return to Krillian space. You're going to tell your superiors exactly what happened here. And you're going to recommend very strongly that they reconsider their position on human diplomatic immunity." Zexkar found his voice, though it cracked with fear. "What? What are you?" "We're doctors, Admiral. Among other things. And we've learned that sometimes the most effective medicine is prevention." The Krillian High Command chamber fell silent as Admiral Zexkar finished his report. The massive circular room, carved from a single piece of obsidian, seemed to press down on him with the weight of 1,000 conquered worlds. 12 Supreme Commanders sat in judgment, their black eyes reflecting the holographic display of his encounter with the human ship. "You expect us to believe," Supreme Commander Thacomer said slowly, his voice like grinding stone, "that a single human vessel made 11 of our warships simply disappear?" Zexkar's mandibles clicked nervously. "I have the sensor logs, Supreme Commander. The crew of the Deathbringer witnessed everything. The humans possess technology that makes our most advanced systems look primitive." "Impossible," snorted Supreme Commander Valresh. "We have conquered 47 star systems. Our technology is superior to anything in this galaxy. These humans have barely left their own solar system." "With respect, Supreme Commander," Zexkar replied carefully, "that may be exactly why we underestimated them. While we focused on conquest and military expansion, they may have been developing technologies we never considered." Supreme Commander Krikstal, the oldest and most feared of the Council, leaned forward in her throne. "Show us these sensor logs again, Admiral. Focus on the moment their ship began moving." The holographic display replayed the encounter. The assembled commanders watched in growing unease as the human vessel performed maneuvers that should have been impossible. When it began phasing through solid matter, more than one commander shifted uncomfortably in their seats. There must be an explanation, Fakemore insisted. Perhaps they're using some form of advanced holographic projection, making us see ships that aren't really there? The mass displacement readings were real, Supreme Commander. Whatever they did, it actually removed our ships from normal spacetime. Zexkar pulled up another set of readings. Our scientists have been analyzing the data for 3 cycles. They have no explanation for what we witnessed. Crystal stood slowly, her ancient joints creaking. At nearly 12 feet tall, she dominated the chamber even more than the others. Admiral Zexkar, tell me about this, Captain Chun. What did you observe about the humans themselves? They showed no fear, Supreme Commander. Even when faced with overwhelming firepower, they remained calm. Captain Chin spoke as if she were discussing weather patterns rather than facing annihilation. And when they demonstrated their capabilities, Zexkar paused, remembering. There was no malice in it. No joy in destroying our ships. They seemed almost regretful. Regretful? Valresh laughed harshly. You make them sound like pacifists? Perhaps they are, Zexkar said quietly. But that doesn't make them weak. In fact, it might make them more dangerous. The chamber erupted in angry chittering and clicking. The idea that pacifists could be dangerous was antithetical to everything the Krillian Empire believed. Their entire civilization was built on the principle that strength came from aggression, that the universe belonged to those willing to take it by force. Crystal raised one massive claw, and silence fell instantly. Explain yourself, Admiral. Supreme Commander, throughout our history, we have encountered species that fought us with desperation, with rage, with fear. We know how to deal with these emotions. We feed on them. But the humans, they fought us with disappointment, as if our attack was an unfortunate misunderstanding rather than an act of war. Zexkar's voice grew thoughtful. What kind of being looks at superior firepower and feels sorry for the attackers? One that knows something we don't, Crystal said slowly. Continue your analysis, Admiral. Think about it, Supreme Commanders. Every species we've conquered followed predictable patterns when faced with superior technology. They either surrendered, fled, or fought desperately with whatever weapons they had. The humans did none of these things. They had the power to destroy us instantly, but instead they chose to simply remove the threat. No torture, no displays of superiority, no conquest. They neutralized our forces and then calmly explained why we should reconsider our actions. Supreme Commander Hakvin, who had remained silent throughout the discussion, finally spoke. You're suggesting they could have destroyed us but chose not to? I'm saying they demonstrated restraint that no military force should possess while wielding power that no military force should have, Zexkar replied. And the most disturbing part? Captain Chin called herself a doctor. A doctor? Fakemore's voice carried confusion. Their medical personnel serve on warships? That's just it, Supreme Commander. I don't think the Harmony was a warship. Their records indicate it was a genuine diplomatic vessel, carrying medical supplies and refugees, as Captain Chun stated. Yet it possessed defensive capabilities that exceed our most advanced dreadnoughts. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. If the human civilian vessels possessed such technology, what might their actual military be capable of? Crystal began pacing, her massive form moving with surprising grace. Tell me, Admiral, what do our intelligence networks say about human space? That's the problem, Supreme Commander. Our networks have found almost nothing. Human space appears to consist of their home system and perhaps a dozen colonies. Small populations, limited industrial capacity, minimal military presence. By all accounts, they should be easy prey, except no one who has attempted aggressive action against human interests has ever reported back. We assumed it was due to their council protection. But now, Zexkar's voice trailed off. Now you think the humans themselves eliminated these threats. Crystal finished. I think the humans are not what they appear to be, Zexkar said carefully. And I think we need to very carefully consider our next move. Supreme Commander Kelvash, the youngest of the council, slammed his claw against his throne. This is madness. We are the Krillian Empire. We have ruled this sector for 300 years. I refuse to be intimidated by a handful of soft-skinned mammals who stumbled into space travel yesterday. Then perhaps you would like to lead the next expedition against them? Crystal asked mildly. Kelvash's aggressive posture faltered slightly. I thought not. Crystal returned to her throne. Admiral Zexkar, I want you to prepare a comprehensive analysis of everything we know about humans. Cross-reference with any disappearances or unexplained incidents in sectors where they have diplomatic presence. I want to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Yes, Supreme Commander and Admiral. Crystal's voice carried a note of warning. I want you to personally oversee this investigation. Because if you're right about human capabilities, we may need to reconsider everything we thought we knew about this galaxy. And if you're wrong? She let the threat hang unfinished. As Zexkar left the chamber, he couldn't shake the memory of Captain Chun's voice. There had been something in her tone when she mentioned being a doctor, a weight of knowledge and experience that spoke of capabilities far beyond simple medical training. The Krillian Empire had built its power on the assumption that they were the apex predators of space. But what happened when the apex predator encountered something that didn't fit into the food chain at all? Something that looked at their displays of power and felt not fear or anger, but genuine concern for their well-being? For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Zexkar was beginning to understand what fear truly felt like. 3 weeks into his investigation, Admiral Zexkar sat in his private study aboard the Deathbringer, surrounded by data files that painted an increasingly disturbing picture. Each report he read challenged everything he thought he knew about humans and their place in galactic society. Computer, display file designation H47 Alpha. He commanded. The holographic display showed a Zephyrian trade convoy that had vanished 2 years ago, while carrying illegal weapons to rebel forces in the Vega system. The convoy's last known position was near the edge of human space. Cross-reference with file designation H12 Gamma. Another display appeared showing a Borthak slaver fleet that had disappeared while raiding primitive worlds under human diplomatic protection. No distress signals, no debris, no survivors. Just empty space where a dozen ships had been. Zexkar's mandibles clicked as he studied the patterns. In every case, the missing forces had been engaged in activities that violated Galactic Council regulations. But more importantly, they had all been threatening beings under human protection or humanitarian aid. Computer, compile all instances where human diplomatic vessels were present during unexplained military disappearances. The results made his chitinous hide crawl. 47 separate incidents over the past 5 years. Each time, human ships had been in the area conducting what their records claimed were medical missions, refugee transport, or humanitarian aid. Each time, forces engaged in what humans termed crimes against sentience had simply vanished. His communications panel chimed. Admiral, you have an incoming transmission from Intelligence Division. Put it through. Director Vexahol materialized. As a hologram, his scarred face showing unusual tension. Admiral, I have the report you requested on human activities. You're not going to like what we found. Show me. We managed to infiltrate one of their outer colonies using a deep cover agent. What he discovered, Vexahol paused. Admiral, the humans have been lying about everything. Their population, their technology, their capabilities. Everything. The Zexkar leaned forward in his chair. Explain. Our agent reported that what we thought was a simple farming colony was actually a massive research facility. The humans have technology that makes our most advanced systems look like stone tools. But that's not the strangest part. Continue. They're not using this technology for conquest or expansion. They're using it for medical research, environmental restoration, and what they call universal health care. Admiral, they've solved aging. Death by disease is completely unknown in human space. They've turned their entire civilization into one massive medical institution. Zexkar felt a chill run down his spine. That's impossible. No species develops that kind of technology without using it for military expansion. That's what I thought too. But our agent was discovered and captured. Instead of execution or torture, they treated him. Vexahul's voice carried disbelief. They cured a genetic defect he'd carried since birth, enhanced his immune system, and then released him with a message. What message? Vexahul transmitted a data file. The human who treated him was a doctor named Elizabeth Reeves. She said, and I quote, "Please tell your superiors that the human medical community is always available to provide assistance to any species that requests it. We have treatments for virtually every known disease, injury, or genetic condition. Our only requirement is that patients agree to peaceful interaction protocols during treatment." The file included medical scans of the agent before and after his capture. The improvements to his physiology were staggering. Enhanced bone density, optimized cardiovascular system, reinforced neural pathways. He had been transformed into a perfect specimen of Krillian biology. "There's more, Admiral," our agent asked Dr. Reeves why they released him instead of executing him as a spy. Her response was, "Because you're sick. Your entire species is suffering from what we call aggression syndrome disorder. It's a treatable condition." Zexkar's claws scraped against his desk. "They consider our nature a disease?" "From a medical standpoint, apparently yes. They view our aggressive expansion, our need for conquest, our pleasure in causing suffering to other species as symptoms of a psychological disorder that can be cured." The implications were staggering. If humans truly possessed medical technology advanced enough to alter fundamental aspects of species psychology, they weren't just more advanced than the Krillian Empire. They were operating on an entirely different level of existence. "Director, have you verified these claims?" Our agent submitted to full medical examination upon return. "The enhancements are real, Admiral. The humans did everything they claimed to do. But there's something else." Vexahul transmitted another file. "We've been monitoring human communications using our most advanced intercepts. We found references to something called the Galactic Health Initiative. It appears the humans have been secretly providing medical aid to dozens of species across the galaxy. Without their knowledge, sometimes. Other times with full cooperation. Admiral, do you remember the Kaleri plague that wiped out 70% of their population 12 years ago?" Zexkar nodded. The Kaleri had been a potential client species before the plague made them too weak to be useful. The plague stopped spreading overnight. The Kaleri credit it to natural immunity, but our analysis suggests external intervention. Medical intervention that could only have come from a species with incredibly advanced biological manipulation capabilities. The humans. The humans have been quietly healing the galaxy, Admiral. Species that should have gone extinct from disease or genetic defects have mysteriously recovered. Worlds that were dying from environmental collapse have been secretly restored. And every single intervention has one thing in common. Which is? The recovered species all show marked decreases in aggressive behavior and increases in cooperative social structures. The humans aren't just curing diseases, Admiral. They're curing violence itself. Zexkar stood and paced to the viewports, staring out at the stars. That's why Captain Chun showed no fear. She wasn't facing enemies, she was facing patients. Exactly. From their perspective, we're not a military threat to be defeated. We're a sick species that needs treatment. The communication panel chimed again. Zexkar's aide announced, "Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. They're requesting immediate conference with Krillian High Command." "On what matter?" "Sir, the human representative is formally requesting permission to establish medical facilities in Krillian space. They're offering free treatment for what they term widespread psychological and biological disorders affecting the Krillian population." Vexahul's hologram flickered with static interference. "Admiral, there's one more thing you need to know. Our deep analysis of human communications suggests they've been debating for several years whether to intervene directly in Krillian space. The faction that opposed intervention was concerned about violating what they call patient consent protocols." "Meaning?" meaning they wanted our permission before treating us. But Admiral, our recent attacks on their diplomatic vessels and the civilians under their protection have apparently shifted the balance. The intervention faction is now citing emergency medical protocols and duty to prevent harm to vulnerable populations. Zexkar felt something he had never experienced before. The sensation of being completely outmaneuvered by an opponent he had never understood. The humans hadn't been tolerating Krillian aggression out of weakness or fear. They had been showing the patience of doctors dealing with particularly difficult patients. But now it seemed their patience was running out. Director, what happens when a doctor decides a patient is too dangerous to treat on an outpatient basis? Vexahol's scarred face showed grim understanding. Involuntary commitment, Admiral. For the safety of the patient and others. Outside the viewports, the stars suddenly seemed a lot less friendly. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of Terra Medical Station, watching Earth rotate slowly below. At 45, she had already witnessed the transformation of human civilization from a species barely capable of interstellar travel into the galaxy's most advanced medical civilization. Her reflection in the glass showed tired eyes that had seen too much suffering, both among humans and the countless alien species they had quietly helped over the past decades. Doctor, the council is ready for your presentation, announced her assistant, Dr. Chun Wei-Ming, the younger brother of Captain Sarah Chun. Elizabeth turned from the window and walked toward the conference chamber. The Human Medical Council consisted of 12 individuals who collectively guided humanity's approach to galactic healthcare. Today's meeting would determine how they responded to what the military observers were calling the Krillian situation. Before we begin, said Council Chairman Dr. Amara Okafor, let's review the latest intelligence reports from Captain Chun's encounter. The holographic display showed the Harmony sensor readings during the confrontation with Admiral Zexkar's fleet. Elizabeth studied the Krillian biological signatures with professional interest. Elevated stress hormones, abnormal neural firing, patterns in the aggression centers of their brains, and most telling of all, severely depleted levels of natural empathy suppressors. Classic symptoms, she murmured. Textbook aggression syndrome disorder with what appears to be species-wide genetic predisposition. Dr. James Patterson, the Council's specialist in interspecies psychology, nodded grimly. We've been monitoring Krillian behavior patterns for 15 years. The entire species shows consistent markers for what we would classify as severe antisocial personality disorder if it were occurring in humans. But it's not just individuals, it's their entire civilization. The question, said Dr. Sarah Kim, is whether this is a natural evolutionary development or the result of some kind of environmental factor. Elizabeth pulled up a genetic analysis of the Krillian prisoner they had treated and released. I believe it's genetic, but artificially induced. Look at these sequences here. She highlighted specific gene clusters. These modifications appear to have been made deliberately, possibly thousands of years ago. Someone or something enhanced the Krillian capacity for aggression while suppressing their natural empathy responses. Biological warfare, suggested Dr. Patterson. More likely social engineering, Elizabeth replied. These modifications wouldn't just make them more aggressive. They would make them more susceptible to hierarchical control structures and less likely to question authority. Perfect soldiers, in other words. Council Chairman Okafor leaned back in her chair. The question we face today is what our moral obligations are toward a species that was essentially programmed for violence. Do we have the right to intervene without their consent? Dr. Chun Wei-Ming spoke up. With respect, Madam Chairman, I think we're past the consent stage. The Krillians have been committing what can only be called genocide against dozens of species. From a medical ethics standpoint, we're dealing with a patient who poses an immediate danger to themselves and others. But they're not our patients, argued Dr. Lisa Rodriguez from the far end of the table. We've established the principle that we only provide medical intervention when requested or when protecting those under our care. Direct intervention in Krillian space would violate every protocol we've established. Elizabeth had been quiet throughout the debate, but now she stood and activated her own presentation. I'd like to share something with the Council that might change our perspective on this situation. The holographic display shifted to show a star map of the local galactic sector. Dozens of worlds were highlighted in red. These are worlds that have been attacked by Krillian forces in the past 5 years, Elizabeth began. But look at this pattern. The display showed movement vectors and timeline data. The Krillians aren't just randomly conquering territory. They're systematically targeting species that show signs of developing cooperative social structures. Meaning? Asked Dr. O'Cuffer. Meaning they're not just aggressive. They're specifically targeting the development of peaceful civilizations. Every species they've attacked was in the process of transitioning from competitive to cooperative social models. The same transitions that allowed humans to develop our current medical civilization. Dr. Patterson frowned. Are you suggesting the Krillians are actively preventing the evolution of peaceful species? I'm suggesting that whoever modified the Krillian genome didn't just create soldiers. They created immune system cells designed to attack cooperation itself. Elizabeth's voice grew grim. From a medical standpoint, the Krillian Empire isn't just sick. It's a cancer that's spreading through the galactic community. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Dr. Rodriguez was the first to speak. If that's true, then we're not just talking about treating individual Krillians. We're talking about preventing a contagion that could destroy galactic civilization. Exactly. And we have evidence that it's already spreading. Elizabeth showed new data. Several species that have been conquered by the Krillians are beginning to show similar behavioral modifications. The Borthic Empire, the Zephyrian Collective, the Talvari hegemony, all of them have adopted increasingly aggressive policies since coming under Krillian influence. Dr. Chun Wei Ming looked up from his datapad. My sister's report mentioned that the Krillian admiral seemed genuinely puzzled by her response to their attack. He kept expecting her to react with fear or anger. Because those are the only responses they understand, Elizabeth replied. The genetic modifications have made it almost impossible for them to comprehend nonviolent solutions to conflict. They literally cannot imagine a world where medical intervention is preferred over military action. Chairman Okafor stood slowly. Dr. Reeves, what are you proposing? Elizabeth took a deep breath. I'm proposing that we invoke Emergency Medical Protocol 7, full species intervention to prevent galactic pandemic. The chamber erupted in discussion. Protocol 7 had never been used before. It authorized large-scale medical intervention without consent when dealing with threats to galactic biological stability. The risks are enormous, Dr. Rodriguez pointed out. If we're wrong about the Krillians, we could be guilty of forced medical experimentation on an entire species. And if we're right, Elizabeth countered, and we do nothing, we could be watching the extinction of every peaceful species in the galaxy. Double quotes, Dr. Patterson pulled up historical files. We've seen this before, on a smaller scale. The Rigelian virus that caused species-wide paranoia and aggression. The Centauri neural parasites that drove their hosts to violence. In every case, early intervention saved not just the infected species but prevented spread to others. But those were clearly biological pathogens, Dr. Kim argued. This is genetic. Modification that's been stable for centuries, possibly millennia. Stable but not natural, Elizabeth replied, and clearly still spreading through cultural transmission if not biological means. The species that fall under Krillian influence are adopting their behavioral patterns, even when they're not genetically modified. Chairman Okafor called for quiet. Dr. Reeves, what would Protocol 7 intervention look like in this case? Medical stations in Krillian space offering treatment for what we would term inherited, neurological disorders, genetic therapy to restore natural empathy responses and reduce pathological aggression. Psychological counseling to help them understand and process emotions they've never been able to experience properly. And if they refuse treatment, Elizabeth's expression hardened. Then we use the same protocols we would use for any patient, suffering from delusions that make them dangerous to themselves and others. We provide treatment whether they think they need it or not. Dr. Chun Wei Ming looked around the chamber. There's something else to consider. The Krillians have been studying us since my sister's encounter. If we wait much longer, they may develop countermeasures to our medical technology. Or worse, added Dr. Patterson, they may try to weaponize their condition and spread it deliberately to other species. Chairman Okafor looked at each member of the council in turn. All those in favor of authorizing Protocol 7 intervention in Krillian space. 7 hands rose immediately. After a long moment, 3 more joined them. Only Dr. Rodriguez and 1 other member abstained. The motion carries, Chairman Okafor announced. Dr. Reeves, you're authorized to begin preparation for large-scale medical intervention in Krillian space. And God help us all if we're making the wrong choice. Elizabeth nodded solemnly. I'll start by contacting Captain Chun. Her ship will need to be modified for medical operations instead of diplomatic missions. As the council disbanded, Elizabeth returned to the window overlooking Earth. Somewhere out there, an entire species was suffering from a genetic disorder that made them incapable of the very emotions that made civilization possible. They had been turned into living weapons by some unknown force, and now it fell to humanity to try to heal them. The irony wasn't lost on her that the galaxy's most feared military force was about to receive the most comprehensive medical care in galactic history, whether they wanted it or not. Admiral Zexkar stared at the impossible sight before him through the Deathbringer's main viewport. Where 3 days ago there had been empty space at the edge of the Krillian home system, now stood structures that defied every principle of military engineering he understood. The human medical stations weren't built like fortresses or weapons platforms. Instead, they resembled crystalline flowers blooming in the void, their surfaces gleaming with soft, healing light. 12 massive installations had simply appeared. Overnight, positioned at strategic points throughout the system without triggering a single alarm or detection grid. Supreme Commander Krikstal demands immediate status report. His communications officer announced nervously. Zexkar activated the holographic display. The ancient Krillian leader's image flickered to life, her expression showing the first genuine fear he had ever seen on her scarred features. Admiral, explain how 12 massive installations materialized in our home system without our knowledge, she demanded. I cannot explain it, Supreme Commander. Our sensors showed nothing until they simply became visible. No construction ships, no supply convoys, no energy signatures indicating assembly. They're just, weapon status, unknown. Our tactical analysis indicates they possess no recognizable weapon systems. But given what we witnessed with the human diplomatic vessel, Zexkar let the implications hang unspoken. Krikstal's mandibles clicked in agitation. Have they made any demands, ultimatums? That's the strangest part, Supreme Commander. They've been broadcasting on all frequencies, but not threats. They're offering medical services. Medical services? Zexkar transmitted the human communications log. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves, apparently their chief medical officer, has been broadcasting continuous messages offering free treatment for what she calls inherited neurological disorders and genetic abnormalities affecting the Krillian population. This must be some kind of psychological warfare, Krikstal growled. Humans don't possess medical technology superior to ours. Supreme Commander, I've been analyzing their broadcasts. The humans are describing genetic modifications that match exactly with the abnormalities our own scientists have documented in our genome. Modifications we've never shared with any outside species. The implications of that statement created uncomfortable silence on both ends of the transmission. They know about the modifications? Krikstal asked quietly. More than know about them. They're claiming they can reverse them. Before Krikstal could respond, every communication system on the Deathbringer activated simultaneously. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves' image appeared on every screen throughout the ship, her voice reaching every member of the crew. Greetings to all Krillian personnel, she said, her tone carrying the calm authority of an experienced physician. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Reeves of the Human Medical Council. I'm speaking to you directly because your leadership appears reluctant to discuss the serious medical crisis affecting your species. Zexkar tried to cut the transmission, but the human signal overrode every security protocol his ship possessed. Over the past several hours, we've been conducting detailed scans of the Krillian population. What we've discovered is deeply disturbing. Your entire species is suffering from severe genetic modifications that have impaired your capacity for empathy, enhanced pathological aggression, and created what can only be described as species-wide psychological trauma. Throughout the ship, Krillian crew members stopped their work to listen. Something in the human doctor's voice demanded attention in a way that military orders never had. These modifications were not natural evolutionary developments. They were artificially induced, likely by an unknown species thousands of years ago. From a medical standpoint, every Krillian alive today is suffering from conditions that are completely treatable with modern genetic therapy. Admiral Zexkar felt something strange happening to his thought processes. The doctor's words were triggering responses in parts of his brain that he had never been aware of before. I want to address the Krillian military leadership directly, Dr. Reeves continued, somehow looking directly at Zexkar through the screen. You've spent your careers believing that aggression and conquest are signs of strength. But from a medical perspective, your behavior patterns are symptoms of severe neurological damage. The compulsive need to dominate others, the inability to feel satisfaction from peaceful achievements, the pleasure you derive from causing suffering, these are not personality traits. They're clinical symptoms of genetic disorders that have been preventing your species from experiencing the full range of emotions that make civilization possible. Zexkar tried to feel angry at the human's presumption, but instead found himself experiencing something he couldn't identify. A hollow ache in his chest, as if some vital organ had been missing his entire life. We're not here as conquerors or judges, Doctor, Reeves said, her voice growing softer. We're here as healers. Every human medical facility in this system is equipped to provide genetic therapy that will restore your natural emotional range, reduce pathological aggression, and repair the psychological damage that has been inflicted on your species. The transmission switched to show the interior of one of the medical stations. Krillian prisoners from various conflicts over the years were visible, but they looked different, healthier somehow. Their movements were less aggressive, their postures more relaxed. One of them, a former Supreme Commander that Zexkar recognized, spoke directly to the camera. My name is Velkoth. 3 months ago, I was captured during a raid on human shipping. Instead of execution, they brought me here for medical treatment. Velkoth's voice carried emotions that Zexkar had never heard from any Krillian. They showed me what we really are. What we were before the modifications. I can feel things now that I never knew existed: compassion, genuine satisfaction from helping others. The ability to form emotional bonds based on something other than dominance hierarchies. The humans didn't just heal my injuries, Velkoth continued. They healed parts of my mind that I didn't even know were broken. For the first time in my life, I understand why other species feared us. And for the first time in my life, I feel regret for the suffering we've caused. Dr. Reeves reappeared on screen. Treatment is completely voluntary, but I want every Krillian to understand what they're missing. Your species was designed to be incapable of experiencing joy, love, artistic appreciation, genuine friendship, or the satisfaction that comes from creating rather than destroying. You've been living with severe emotional disabilities your entire lives, convinced that your limited emotional range was normal. It's not normal. It's a medical condition and it's treatable. The transmission ended, leaving the Deathbringer in unprecedented silence. Zexkar looked around the bridge and saw something he had never witnessed before. Krillian crew members with expressions of confusion and what might have been hope. Admiral, his tactical officer said quietly, request permission to undergo medical scanning. Denied, Zexkar replied automatically, but his voice lacked conviction. Sir, the communications officer added, I've been reviewing the sensor data from our encounter with the human diplomatic ship. If the humans are correct about our condition, it would explain many inconsistencies in our tactical analysis. Inconsistencies? Our inability to understand non-aggressive responses to conflict. Our assumption that all species must be motivated by conquest or fear. Our failure to comprehend cooperative behavior between different species. The officer's voice grew thoughtful. What if our military doctrine has been flawed because we literally cannot perceive half of the possible responses to any given situation? Supreme Commander Crystal's image flickered back to life. Admiral, I want a full analysis of the human claims. If there's any possibility they're correct about our condition, Supreme Commander, then we may have spent 3 centuries acting on faulty intelligence about the nature of galactic civilization itself. Her ancient voice carried something that might have been wonder. Admiral, what if every species we've conquered was trying to communicate with us in ways we were physically incapable of understanding? Zexkar stared at the medical stations gleaming in the distance. Somewhere inside those crystalline structures, former enemies were offering to heal damage he hadn't known existed. The question was whether the Krillian Empire was ready to discover what they had been missing. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Zexkar found himself curious about something other than tactics and conquest. He found himself wondering what it might feel like to experience emotions beyond anger and dominance. It was a dangerous curiosity, and he wasn't sure he had the courage to pursue it. 6 weeks after the human medical stations had appeared in Krillian space, Admiral Zexkar stood in the treatment chamber aboard Medical Station Hippocrates, his massive frame dwarfed by the sophisticated medical equipment surrounding him. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves monitored his vital signs from a nearby console, her expression showing the focused attention of a physician dealing with a particularly complex case. "How do you feel, Admiral?" she asked, making notes on her datapad. Zex single quotes KAR. Examined his claws, noting how they no longer seemed to automatically curl into threatening positions. "Strange," he admitted. "I keep expecting to feel rage about being here, about submitting to treatment, but instead I feel curious," Dr. Reeves suggested. "Yes, and something else I cannot identify. Gratitude," she said gently. "You're feeling grateful that someone cared enough to help you, even after all the harm you've caused." The concept hit Zexkar like a physical blow. Gratitude, an emotion so foreign to Krillian experience that they didn't even have a word for it in their language. Yet now he could feel it as clearly as he had once felt battle rage. "The genetic modifications are responding better than we anticipated, Doctor," Reeves continued. "Your empathy centers are regenerating faster than our most optimistic projections. How are you processing the memory integration therapy?" Zexkar was quiet for a long moment. The memory integration therapy was perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the treatment, as his restored brain chemistry allowed him to process emotions properly. He was re-experiencing every act of violence he had committed throughout his military career. But now, instead of feeling pride or satisfaction, he felt the full emotional weight of the suffering he had caused. "I destroyed 17 civilizations," he said quietly. "Billions of sentient beings died because of orders I gave. How do I live with that knowledge?" "The same way any trauma survivor learns to live with their experiences," Dr. Reeves replied. "One day at a time, with support from others who understand what you're going through, and by dedicating yourself to making sure it never happens again. Is that what you humans did? When you discovered your own capacity for violence?" Dr. Reeves paused in her work. "Admiral, can I share something with you about human history?" "Please." 2 centuries ago, humans were not the peaceful medical civilization you see today. We spent millennia engaged in constant warfare, genocide, environmental destruction, and every form of cruelty imaginable. The transition to our current society wasn't natural evolution. It was a deliberate choice made after we nearly destroyed ourselves. Zexkar's newly enhanced emotional range allowed him to hear the pain in her voice. "What changed?" "We developed the technology to alter our own aggressive impulses. Not through genetic modification like what was done to your species, but through understanding the neurological basis of violence and choosing to modify our social structures to minimize it. We literally redesigned human civilization around the principle of preventing suffering. But you still maintain military capabilities. We maintain medical capabilities that can be used defensively when necessary. The technology that allowed my sister's ship to phase," Through your vessels was originally developed for non-invasive surgery. We simply adapted it for protection when needed. The door to the treatment chamber opened and Supreme Commander Crixtal entered. But the ancient Krillian leader looked nothing like the fearsome warrior Zexkar remembered. Her movements were slower, more thoughtful, and her eyes held a depth of emotion that would have been impossible before treatment. "Admiral," she said, her voice carrying tones that Krillian vocal cords had never been designed to produce. "I wanted to speak with you before the High Command meeting tomorrow." Dr. Reeves checked her instruments. "Admiral Zexkar's treatment is complete. You should have full access to your restored emotional range within the next few hours." After the doctor left them alone, Crixtal sat heavily in a chair that had been modified to accommodate Krillian physiology. "Admiral, I have been experiencing emotions I lack words to describe. The humans tell me this is normal during recovery." "What will happen to the Empire, Supreme Commander?" "The Empire as we knew it is finished," Crixtal replied. "Half of our population has voluntarily undergone treatment. The others are beginning to request it as they observe the changes in their treated colleagues. Within a year, there will be no Krillians left who carry the genetic modifications." Zexkar felt something that the humans had taught him to recognize as relief. "And then we begin the process of making amends for 3 centuries of atrocities." Crixtal's voice carried a weight of emotion that made her sound older than her considerable years. "Dr. Reeves has proposed something called restorative justice. We will spend the rest of our lives working to repair the damage we've caused." "How does one restore dead civilizations?" "By ensuring that the communities that survive can rebuild without fear of future aggression. By sharing our technology and resources to help other species develop defenses against similar threats. By serving as an example of how even the most violent species can be healed if they're willing to accept help." Zexkar stood and walked to the observation window. Outside, he could see Krillian warships being retrofitted with medical equipment instead of weapons. The sight filled him with an emotion he was still learning to process: hope. "Supreme Commander, there's something I need to tell you about the humans." "Yes?" "During the early stages of my treatment, I had access to their medical databases. The technology they used to heal us, the genetic therapy, the psychological rehabilitation, none of it was developed for us." Crixtal leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "They developed all of this for themselves. Every technique they used to cure our aggression, every therapy they used to help us process our trauma, every modification they made to our social structures. They tested it all on their own species first." "You're saying that humans were once like us?" "Worse than us, according to their historical records. They spent thousands of years in a state of constant warfare that makes our empire look restrained by comparison. But they found a way to heal themselves, and then they dedicated their entire civilization to healing others." Crixtal was quiet for a long time. "That explains their patience with us. They understood what we were going through because they had experienced it themselves. And it explains why they never retaliated against our attacks with violence. They knew that violence was a symptom of our condition, not our true nature." The Supreme Commander stood slowly, her ancient joints no longer creaking with the constant tension that had defined Krillian posture for millennia. "Admiral, tomorrow, the High Command will formally dissolve the Krillian Empire and establish what the humans are calling a Restoration Council. Will you serve as its military advisor?" "Military advisor?" "We'll need to understand our own capabilities from a defensive rather than offensive perspective. And we'll need someone who understands both our former nature and our current recovery, to help coordinate with other species who may not trust our transformation." Zexkar felt another unfamiliar emotion, a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with conquest or dominance. "Yes, Supreme Commander, I would be honored to serve." As they prepared to leave the medical station, Dr. Reeves appeared in the corridor. "Admiral, Supreme Commander, how are you adjusting to the treatment?" "Doctor," Crixtal said, her voice carrying new depth, "I have a question that has been troubling me. Why did your species choose to help us? We had done nothing to deserve such kindness." Dr. Reeves smiled, an expression that Zexkar now understood conveyed warmth rather than aggression. Because that's what doctors do. We see suffering and we work to end it. It doesn't matter if the patient caused their own condition or if they initially resist treatment. Our job is to heal. Even if the patient has caused suffering to others? Especially then, Dr. Reeves replied. Because untreated patients become sources of more suffering. By healing you, we prevent future harm to countless others. As they walked toward the transport that would return them to the Krillian fleet, Zexkar realized that he was experiencing something that no Krillian had felt in over 3,000 years. He was looking forward to tomorrow not because it might bring conquest or domination, but because it would bring the opportunity to help repair the damage his species had caused. For the first time in his life, Admiral Zexkar understood what it meant to feel hope.